Welcome to another edition of Sports and the Geopolitical Economy on Armorgate Radio Communications, and I'm your host, Abiodun Abari. It promises to be a rewarding time, and thanks for joining me. Now, let's get after it. Kindly recall that I advanced some reasons, some objectives of Ukraine pushing the envelope by breaching Russia's border and occupying parts of the Kursk region. I say that it could be a bargaining chip when the time for talks or negotiations come, which might be sooner if Donald Trump wins the U.S. presidential elections in November. And also, it could also be to force Russia to divert military resources from eastern Ukraine, where they have been making relatively consistent territorial gains, and also to justify the huge investments by Ukraine's western backers, at least showing that they are worthy militarily. Now, Ukraine's top commander, Colonel General Alexander Syrsky, has said at a press conference in Kiev that the Ukrainian military's incursion into the Kursk region was a high-stakes gambit meant to force Russia to divert military resources from a key area of the front line. But to the contrary, Russia did not do as Ukraine expected. As Russia restrained and employed strategic patience. Quoting Colonel General Alexander Syrsky, and I quote, one of the tasks of conducting an offensive operation in the Kursk region was to divert significant enemy forces from the other directions. First and foremost, the Povolsk and Kurakovsk directions. Of course, the enemy understands this, so it continues to focus its main efforts on the Povolsk region, direction, where its most combat-ready units are concentrated. The enemy is trying to withdraw units from other directions, while in the Povolsk direction, on the contrary, it is increasing its efforts and concluded by depicting the situation in Pokrovsk and Kurakovsk as quite difficult for Ukraine. Pokrovsk and Kurakovsk are located in west of Donetsk on important supply routes that link Donetsk with Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia. Pokrovsk has been heavily fortified since 2014 and it is a main logistics hub for the Ukrainian military. But Russia has been making incremental gains towards the city, conducting heavy attacks recently. So the Ukrainian incursion into the Kursk region of Russia on August 6 is the biggest attack in territorial Russia since hostilities began in February 2022. With at least a dozen Russian civilians killed and over 120 wounded, and Russia evacuating over 120,000 residents. However, the shifting in the messaging from the office of the Ukrainian leader, that's Volodymyr Zelensky, whose official tenure has actually ended but is still holding on to power under martial law, must be noted. First, the incursion was deemed necessary to cause panic among the Russian citizenry and then to have a strong position during peace negotiations with Russia. And next, the messaging was that Ukraine wanted to create a buffer zone inside Russia to discourage Moscow from sanctioning an attack on the Sumy region of Ukraine, which of course borders Russia's Kursk. Emphatically, Zelensky has said that the incursion was really about preempting a Russian plan to attack Sumy region of Ukraine from Kursk and then capture the administrative center. And I'm quoting him now. He said, "You said somebody claimed that we are playing this as a card for dialogue. What dialogue? The only one saying anything like that is Putin." He concluded by saying that we did not play any cards. And the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, has said that the death and harm the incursion has inflicted on Russian civilians has made any negotiations with Ukraine impossible, deviating from his earlier stance where he offered a ceasefire in exchange for political and military concessions. Clearly, this is an escalation of the conflict. When I look at Ukraine's objective of causing panic and disaffection among the Russian citizenry, I remind myself that it is Russia and the old Soviet Union that faced the invasion of Napoleon in the early 20th century, and of course it was the old Soviet Union that lost over 26 million people in the Second World War. So I think Russia are the kind of people that will always bind together in times of crisis, as against abandoning their leadership and going in disarray. Okay, I think they have experiences that have actually helped them to be able to bind together when faced with external aggression. However, the spokesperson for the United States Department of Defense, that's Air Force Major General Pat Ryder, responded when asked about the advice the U.S. was giving to Ukraine as regards the Kursk incursion. And I quote him, I said, "I'm not going to get into their planning or advice as it relates to that, as it's their decision." Okay, he asserted that they are communicating with the Ukrainians to better understand what their declared objective of establishing a buffer zone in the Kursk region entails. And he also acknowledged the incremental gains Russia has been making in the Donbass, but referred to the media to Ukrainian officials when he was pressed on how long he thinks it would take the Russians to get to Pokrovsk, which is a fortified city crucial to Ukrainian military logistics. Russia has, however, responded militarily to the Kursk incursion by conducting massive high-precision attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure using attack drones, ballistic and cruise missiles to destroy electricity infrastructure in most parts of Ukraine, and also targeted air bases in Kiev and Dnipropetrovsk, which harbor Western supplied military hardware. Okay. Notably, this is the biggest attack on Ukraine since the commencement of the crisis, right? Having over 230 missiles and drones hitting targets in 15 Ukraine regions. Okay. Then, of course, Russia followed up by carrying out precision strikes against air bases in four regions of Ukraine using Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Okay. Now, hypersonic missiles are very, very difficult to detect and defend against because they travel faster than the speed of sound. So the strikes in four regions of Khmelnytskyi, Sumy, Kryvyi and Rovno. Critical airfield infrastructure facilities were targeted using long-range air-launched precision weapons and also attack UAVs as unmanned aerial vehicles. And of course, Zelensky has acknowledged the use of the F-16 fighter jets to shoot down incoming missiles, and thanking the United States and its allies. And like the famed Oliver II is asking for more fighter jets. I think about 10 have been delivered out of the 80 promised, and also the need for training of pilots to fly the jets. Okay, and of course he has criticized Poland for refraining from unilaterally shooting down the missiles that Russia fired over Ukraine. But Poland has responded that it needs an agreement with NATO allies before taking such a decision. So clearly there's an escalation as a result of Ukraine's Kursk incursion, even as the US continues to advance its hegemonic objectives. All right. So, talking about the upgrade of US forces in Japan into a joint force headquarters under the command of a 3-star general who will report to the Indo-Pacific Command. Right? So Lord Austin, the U.S. Defense Secretary, has called it one of the strongest improvements of military ties with Japan in 70 years, stressing the unprecedented separate 2+2 ministerial level meeting on deterrence and vowing to defend Japan with the full range of nuclear capabilities. However, Zhang Xiaogang, the Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson, has accused the United States of making irresponsible decisions in its efforts to sustain its hegemony through intimidating the international community with its nuclear capabilities. Zhang emphasized that the US and Japan advanced the Chinese military threats as a justification for their action. Notably, China's expansion of its nuclear arsenal was extensively discussed at the unprecedented extended deterrence bilateral meeting. But contrasting the US-Japan position, Zhang further asserted that it is the US that poses the biggest nuclear threat to the world, since it has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, and also adopts a policy that allows the first use of nuclear weapons. But factually, the United States is the only country that has used nuclear weapons in war. Hiroshima and Nagasaki comes into view here, forcing Japan into unconditional surrender in World War II. And the United States National Defense Strategy, the NDS, last published by the Pentagon in 2022, with the Nuclear Posture Review and Missile Defense Review, declares Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran as 4 potential enemies for nuclear weapons planning, leaving options open for a first nuclear strike to prevent a conventional attack. And if you recall, I told you that the United States withdrew from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Moscow in 2018, and the treaty banned the two countries from developing and deploying certain specifications of ground-based nuclear-capable hardware. The reason advanced then was that it needed such weapons, and I think another factor could be that China wasn't bound by that INF treaty. And Russia reacted last year by suspending its participation in the new START treaty, which is set to expire in 2026, citing unwelcome and hostile United States policies. But it affirmed its commitment to comply with the core of the treaty by putting a cap on nuclear weapons and delivery systems and capabilities. China is of the opinion that the latest move by the United States and Japan could provoke a bloc confrontation and undermine regional peace and stability by exacerbating regional tensions and increasing the risk of nuclear proliferation and conflicts. I think a critical factor in this unprecedented advancement of a joint US-Japan military alliance is the death of Shinzo Abe, the former Japanese Prime Minister, who I would call the father of modern Japanese nationalism. Shinzo Abe had an ambitious nationalistic agenda for Japan, which will involve its strengthening militarily and winning itself of the dependence on the U.S. He had a grip on the country and was able to facilitate the election of his protege to succeed him as Prime Minister. But unfortunately, he was killed during a political rally in the country with zero gun violence. That singular event of Shinzo Abe's assassination has rolled back Japanese resurgent nationalism by decades. The United States has the highest network of foreign military bases in the history of the world, over about 800 bases in about 80 countries. The first U.S. bases abroad were on Native Americans' territory before the level of expansion we have today. However, Russia, Turkey, United Kingdom, France, China, all have foreign bases, but the U.S. still accounts for at least 90% of the world's foreign military bases. I had previously advanced the formation and the progress of BRICS, the BRICS bloc, as a response to the U.S. Hegemonic and imperial actions and the adoption of the de-dollarization agenda in response to the economic and financial sanctions imposed on Russia, including the exclusion of Russia and Russian banks from the international SWIFT payment system as a consequence of its actions in Ukraine. Janet Yellen, the United States Treasury Secretary, has admitted that the sanctions are only aiding local currencies to the detriment of the dollar. She asserted that the sanctions motivated the BRICS alliance to adopt de-dollarization and utilize local currencies for international exchanges. And quite some progress has been made in this regard, as the Chinese yuan has outpaced the US dollar as the most traded currency in Russia. And India and Brazil are set to trade in crude oil using the Chinese yuan. And India was able to save about $7 billion in currency exchanges by using the Chinese yuan to procure oil at a discount. The Chinese yuan actually accounted for 42% of all cross-border transactions initiated in Russia between 2023 and 2024, with the US dollar accounting for 39.5%. And notably, other developmental states are exploiting this possibility, and there are reports earlier this year that Nigeria might join the train. However, it remains to be seen whether Nigeria will be able to toe that line, as it might signal a gloves-off moment with the United States, with, of course, consequences. I believe that it's important for states to militarize adequately to be able to have a voice on the international stage, all right, and be able to advance their own interest, as it were, all right. Else, the states might always need to comply with hegemonic and imperialistic directives. All right. So, I mean, for a state to be able to effectively utilize or adopt the bamboo diplomacy, where the state is firmly rooted in its values, in its interests, all right, and can tilt, towards any direction, all right, as dictated by its own interests, just mirroring how the bamboo is firm in the ground and can really be influenced by the direction of the wind, bending, in any direction as dictated by the wind, right? And without compromising, is being firmly rooted to the ground. So for a country like Nigeria to be able to adequately adopt that bamboo diplomacy, by being firmly rooted in his own interest and being able to bend towards where his interests can be advanced, I think it's important to militarize. Yes, a good case in studies, Turkey, who have really evolved militarily under Mr. Erdogan, and today Turkey has a voice and a stake in international stage, and that Turkey, they're in Libya militarily, in Qatar, Syria, Azerbaijan, and Somalia, in addition to their 50-year stay in northern Cyprus. However, I still maintain that the US president is still the most singular influencer of world peace, with myriads of foreign bases, military and intelligence assets, and a defense budget over $750 billion. Right? Yes, I recall during President Obama's tenure, when ISIS was thriving and committing all sorts of atrocities, and putting them on video for the world to see, creating panic around the world. And Donald Trump came and wiped out ISIS in months. I don't want to believe that the United States just developed the capacity to obliterate ISIS in the first few months of Mr. Trump's presidency. I believe it's more of how the occupier of the Oval Office of the White House intends to use the United States military and intelligence assets to influence world peace. And even with the conflict in the Middle East, at the moment, with the world at the risk of a third world war, there have been arguments about how Iran was broke under the Trump presidency, all right? And I recall that even the Trump presidency then confronted China. I mean, deterring China from patronizing Iranian oil. That Iran was virtually broke and could not fund the axis of resistance, as they like to call it. Okay, that's the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Palestine, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and of course the Shiite militant in Iraq, right? And when President Biden came, he removed the sanctions, and Iran has been able to make at least about $800 billion, okay, from oil sales. And we can see, right from Hezbollah's attack of Israel down to Hamas attack, and you see the Houthis flexing muscles in the Red Sea, and all of that happening. All right, so I believe that the United States president, has a big influence on world peace. How he decides to use the instruments at his disposal will go a long way in determining how peaceful the world is. Yes, and now that the 2024 Summer Olympics has come and gone, and the events of the opening ceremony still leave a sour taste in the mouths of Christians and conservatives around the world, finding the Last Supper parody a massive overreach of liberalism, right? So we reckon that the core of capitalism, has been more nuanced by liberalism as opposed to developmental states that are more conservative. China, on the other hand, did not cut controversy and spent about $100 million on the opening ceremony of the Beijing 2008 Olympics, and it is considered the best investment in Olympics history, as having branding on a large scale, right? And looking at the scale here, there were 15,000 performers, a giant 147 meters by 22 meters LED screen on the ground of the stadium, and 29 giant firework footprints traveling across Beijing, and of course 3,000 LED beanbags, which created a human LED display. Right. So what you had was a storytelling of Chinese history. 5,000 years of Chinese history was told in 4 hours. From the invention of the paper, to the Silk Road, and of course its modern day accomplishments. So China was able to tell its story, able to sell its own narrative, that it was much more than just the world's relatively cheap labor factory, and now a modern and technologically developed country possessing an enviable cultural heritage and massive global pursuits. And about 2 billion people saw the opening ceremony worldwide, with 34.2 million viewers in the United States, despite it being aired in the morning in the United States due to difference in time zones. So domestically, it was a sense of national pride for the Chinese, and it further enhanced Chinese unity. It was actually became a rallying point for Chinese citizens, and globally, the image of China vastly improved, as corroborated by a BBC World Service poll, which showed the improved image of China in 17 out of the 21 countries sampled. Okay, so tourism was impacted with the surge in 2009. So with the 2028 Olympics coming up in Los Angeles, the coloration will be dictated by whoever comes to power. If it's the Harris Walsh ticket, you might actually have liberalism on display, during the Olympics. And if it's the Trump-Vance ticket, I don't think liberalism will be well celebrated. Yeah. So on the final note today, I will comment on the Nigeria Football Federation's hiring of German Bruno Labbadia to take charge of the Super Eagles. All right. And we reckon that there are existing arguments as to whether international football, which is on a country-by-country basis, of course, should involve coaching crew or managers who are citizens of the country they work for, just like the players, as against hiring foreign coaches or managers, right? But notably, this argument has been watered down with even core capitalist states like England hiring Fabio Capello of Italy and then Ericsson of Sweden, who died this week. Right? So England, even though it's a core capitalist state, and it's part of the core of capitalism, okay, which I explained earlier in previous episodes, hiring foreign coaches or managers, as it were. So I believe that the objective of optimizing the benefits of sports in the geopolitical context is the drive for countries to onboard foreign managers or coaches in international football. Yes. So next episode we will be delving into the conflict in the Middle East and how it's shaping the geopolitical economy. And of course, we'll also be following up on the United States presidential elections, as very important, as the world is constituted today. When the United States sneezes, the world catches cold. And with that, we have come to the end of today's episode. But remember that at Armorgate, they are always ready to help and support your organizations to work optimally, creating frameworks and processes for optimization of resources and attainment of goals. You can reach us and can contact us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Armorgate, and you can call us on +234 810 999 666. You can also visit our website at www.thearmorgate.org. Our email is contact@thearmorgate.org. Thank you for your time. And till I come up on your devices again, it's bye for now.